Uncle B, Blaine Fowler, national champion at BYU. You just heard Paul James call that touchdown pass from Blaine's good friend Robbie Bosco to Kelly Smith on the left side of the end zone there at now Qualcomm Stadium. Blaine, what's your favorite memory of the great broadcaster Paul James?
So it's always stuff on the airplane, because they traveled with us back then on our charter flights. And Paul was, Greg used the word Renaissance man. I heard that. That's perfect description. You know, some people say, oh, this guy's a jack of all trades, but a master, he's a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Not Paul James. He was a master of everything. It was unbelievable how proficient he was in so many different areas of his life. He wasn't just a jack of all trades. He was a master. Like, his ability to paint was unbelievable. His appreciation for music, he was musical, and his appreciation for musical was at a whole other level. And then the thing that I remember most, though, is he was a magician. Like, he could do card tricks and sleight of hand tricks, and he would entertain us coming home from games. So, of course, it'd have to be a win. If it was a loss, we had to act like we were really upset. But we didn't lose very often.
You didn't lose very much.
No, we didn't lose very many times.
Yeah.
So we had that stretch there where we lost the opener against Baylor, and then didn't lose the rest of that season, didn't lose the whole next season, and went into the next season and didn't lose. So we didn't have to act like we were sad ever. And Paul would be there on the plane, and he'd come back, and we'd always have a group of us gathered around, and he'd be doing a card trick, and he would just, it was baffling. We would go, no, Paul, tell us how you did that. And he'd say, nope, magician can never give away his secret.
What sorcery is this?
So he was an amazing man he was part of the team. He was part of the team when I played, and then was right till the very end when he retired. And when I started in broadcasting 32 years ago, he was always very encouraging to me. You need somebody who's the man to tell you, you can do this, man. You have the talent to do it. You can do that. He would give me little tips and nuggets of information that really, really helped me early on in my career. But mostly it was the encouragement, that he gave me.
Much more on Paul James coming up later in the program as well. So on to other football topics. So Tanner Mangum, Zach Wilson. This whole discussion. Here we go. So immediately after the game, the question becomes, okay, what should happen with Zach Wilson? So we've heard from Jeff Grimes and Kalani Sitake alluding to potential change. Not saying we're going with Zach, but what do you think is going to happen this Saturday?
Well, they opened it. So typically, I know they don't like us to talk about that, but they opened it up.
Yes.
Jeff said he earned the right to compete for the job with his performance on the field. Notice he didn't say that after the McNeese game, because he went into the McNeese game, he wasn't good. He looked like a freshman in that game. He did not look like a freshman in the game last week. He looked like he had a greater command. And one thing I'll say about Zach is that he continues to work and get better every single solitary week. And so I think that the coaches have seen that. They're saying, you know what? It looks like he's getting better in practice. He's making better decisions. He's getting the ball out faster. Now they put him in a game, and people say, well, that was against the second string. No, there were 8 starters on Utah State's defense in the ball game on this drive. We counted them up last night on film. And so all of a sudden, he looks like he's made quite a leap in terms of his gameplay. And so I think it's right that Jeff says, you know what? We evaluate people. Every job is always open on the field. And if somebody's progressing in practice and you put them out on the field and what they've been doing in practice translates out onto the field, you have to say, okay, now we've got to take a look at this. That's all I think Jeff was saying was he's earned the right for us to say, hey, you know what? Maybe he's ready to get more playing time, and so I think we'll see him in the game. Will he start? I don't know that they go with him as the starter, but maybe you get in the position. Do you remember when Sonny Lubick had multiple quarterbacks coming through that program back when Colorado State was ranked really highly? He would take the freshman. Remember when he had Holland, but he had Bradley Van Pelt as the starter?
Yep.
He regularly played Holland every game when he was a freshman, because he knew he was going to be the guy the next year, even though he had a really good quarterback and that was starting, to get him ready. And so when he started the next year, it wasn't like a new guy started. It was like, no, this guy can already play. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that this year. Is the value of the experience this year more important than getting an extra year for him and planning to try to redshirt him? I personally think it would be. If the rest of the way you can get him in 6 games and he continues to progress, whether he ends up being the starter or not, it bodes really, really well for BYU next year if he has that experience.
Blaine Fowler with us on BYU Sports Nation, currently discussing the Tanner Mangum or Zach Wilson topic as the starting quarterback for BYU on Saturday night. And I'm with you, Blaine. I think Tanner Mangum will start. I think that they are very cautious with what he will do. BYU has been really slow out of the gate all season long. I think the coaches are looking for a spark that gets BYU some points early in the first quarter, because that generally translates into a BYU win in the Kalani Sitake era. So I don't know. Let's say Tanner Mangum goes out 2 drives, they stall, it's not good. I would not be shocked to see Zach Wilson coming at that moment.
And they may even say, you know what, we got to get him in the game at some point. Let's pick a good time, whether Tanner's playing well or not. People forget that Jim McMahon played a lot when he was a sophomore and Mark Wilson was a junior. Now, Lavelle had a really difficult decision because it became very apparent by the end of that year that, whoa, this Jim McMahon guy is really good. But so's Mark. So what are you going to do? And I know that Jim, he and I have talked about it so many times. He was furious when Lavelle brought him in and said, you're going to redshirt. And so they redshirted him the next year after he had already played.
But then Mark, then
Mark,
2018.
Yeah, then Mark ends up being first-team All-American and a first-round draft pick that year, his senior year. Jim redshirts and comes back, and his first year back from his redshirt, he breaks 70-some crazy NCAA record. So Lavelle looked like a genius after that, right? But Jim was furious, and people forget that as a sophomore, he really played. And in Jim's mind, his thought was, and I remember him saying this to me, I'm better than that guy. Like, I proved it. Why am I not playing? Lavelle's like, well, you know, just relax, youngin'. And Lavelle had a way of calming people down. You notice Jim didn't transfer. Lavelle kept him in here. And it all worked out tremendously well for BYU. Now, this is a little different situation because Tanner's gone next year, but I do think it's a really good idea to try to get Zach Wilson as much playing time as you can get him.
And to me, the conversation boils down to what the offense has done, which brings us to our stat of the day.
It's the BYU Sports Nation stat of the day.
BYU's 118th nationally with 6 yards per attempt and bottom 30 in all the offensive stats. To me, it's like, okay, you can give Tanner Mangum one more chance, you know, and perhaps you mix and match it as you deem fit. But the time for Zach Wilson to see some time is now, whether he starts or not, because the offense just hasn't been good enough collectively. And now there's a stretch of games that aren't as hard as September.
Right.
But let's see Zach Wilson. Why not?
And it's interesting because I think you were mentioned just a little bit ago, Spencer, that this is a whole team thing. It's not on Tanner Mangum that they're not running the football well, again, in the last 2 games. And I hear people, I even see writers write things, and I just watch the film and go, what are people talking about? Like, this group up front is really, really young. And we've said all along, they're really talented. Bunch of NFL guys in that 2 deep on the offensive line. But you're starting a bunch of freshmen and a sophomore, and you only have a couple of veteran guys, and they're running a different offense than they ran, you know, last year. So there's going to be growing pains. When BYU struggled to run the ball, it's not because Austin Hoyt's getting beat one-on-one or Tristan Hodges. No, when they are on the guy they're supposed to be on, they're manhandling, just like they did against Wisconsin. Wisconsin plays vanilla. They're so good, that's what they do. Washington ran a bunch of twists, backer blitz, things like that. Even McNeese did that. Utah State was more creative with what they did defensively. When BYU's getting stopped in the run game, it's because they're missing assignments up front. And there's no frame of reference for Pugh to sit the guys down and say, hey, remember, what Utah State's doing right now is what New Mexico did last year against us. We got this. No, there's none of that. Everything's a brand new experience for them. And so we have to have some patience with the offensive line. Next year, I think they'll be really good. The year after that, when all these freshmen are juniors and seniors, BYU will have a top 5 offensive line in the country 2 years from now. Then you'll do whatever you want to do. That's where it starts. Then you run the ball for 6 yards a carry like Wisconsin does. Then the pass game comes easier. So let's not put it all on Tanner Mangum. Now, will Zach be more likely to try to push the ball upfield? He probably will, and that may help the offense some. It'll also help that the defenses they're playing, although I will say this, Northern Illinois next week is very good defensively. Hawaii's not quite as good as Utah State was defensively. But the schedule now moving forward, a couple of tough teams, but some teams not so good on defense. They'll get better, and every game is more experience for that group up front, and they're going to get better. You know what? If you have Jamal Williams playing tailback and you miss a guy, so what? He'll make the first guy miss and then make you look good. Right now, we're not good enough at running back yet. We're
healthy
enough.
for that
We're
matter.
Healthy because Squally hasn't been healthy for the last couple of games. We don't have the back or Taysom Hill at quarterback, so that when things get messed up front and somebody comes free, that you go, that's okay. We'll take care of one free player. We'll just make that guy miss. Well, that's not happening either. So too many negative plays. That's not on the quarterback. They got to get that buttoned up, and I think they'll just get a little bit better every game assignment-wise up front. They're not getting physically manhandled. BYU does not lack enough team speed to play with these teams. The problems they've had have been assignment problems, and it's a young football team up front.
Blaine, great stuff, man. We appreciate the insights into Paul James, the quarterback situation, and most recently the offensive line. Thanks so much.
Okay, we'll see you tonight on After Further Review.